This is episode 68 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Grace Gudenkauf. Grace is the founder of WIIRE Community. I cannot wait to talk about this. She has 20 plus units in Iowa, lives in Tucson, and she's only 25. So if you're young, get ready. Grace, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to talk to you. Like I was saying in the pre-call, I came across you on Instagram and I was like, why don't I know her? So I'm very glad to get to talk to you and learn more about you today. So you are only 25, but when you were younger, let's go teenage years, were you interested in real estate?
That's a great question. My parents were like an accidental landlord with
Hmm.
one rental, like 4 houses down from them. So I think I always was like, oh, that's a good idea. But I never knew like how I would do it or what that even meant or how to do it.
Yeah, I just love the term accidental landlord. It sounds like a movie to me. Like it's probably
It
like your
does.
parents are like, well, I mean, we have this property. I guess we'll like get money for it.
Yep.
So that kind of at least started your interest in like, hey, look, you can get money for managing a property.
Yeah. But I will say my dad can do everything, but it took like literally 4 years for him to rehab this property. He thinks like a good investment is when the rent is the same amount as the mortgage. So
Oh,
although they did quote unquote did real estate, I definitely didn't learn anything from them. Like I am now the one teaching them like, hey, no, you should probably do it like this.
yeah. It's always nice when your daughter comes to you and says, I just want to tell you about all the things that you've done wrong on your accidental landlord. But they must not have had a site like BiggerPockets or all these podcasts to fall into, which is interesting development and something that obviously you've done very, very well on social and with the podcast. When was the first time where you really decided like, I'm going to do this? Like, I'm going to get into real estate and go all in.
Yeah. So my business partner slash life partner, Bria, would listen to Bigger Pockets in college. And I remember I would like in the car, I'd be like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Like, again, I want to do this, but I don't know when. And then, like, honestly, only 3, 4 months later, I was like, oh, wait, it's winter in Iowa. Let's do this. I realized I could get qualified for a mortgage, which I had no clue I could do.
Yeah.
And so we did our first property. And I think it was literally after the very first property that I was like, let's just keep doing this.
Yeah.
Let's just not let the money stop us and figure out how to keep buying. Because we obviously did not have very much money to get started. And we had to get creative very quickly, but it took one property and I was hooked.
Yeah. So one thing I love to ask for younger investors. So how when you bought the first two, you bought them with the realtor or were they off market?
I've bought mostly everything off market. I am in a
Oh,
smaller market, so I think it's a little bit easier, but I just used a realtor for the first time. And I was like, wait, how does this work? There's so much to go. Like, I'm just used to being in charge. I do all the paperwork.
yeah.
But yeah.
So where are you, how are you sourcing these all the deals up until now?
So everything I feel like has been very different. That's another great advantage of being in a smaller market is that you have so many connections and people start to know you and send things your way. The first one I saw a for rent sign and my first house hack, I wrote a letter. I knew it was empty in my small town. I hand wrote them a letter and they called me. The second one I called a for rent sign and said, hey, I know this is for rent, but do you have anything for sale? It ended up being a guy who had like 30 houses he was trying to sell. And then I totally lied and told him I was an investor as well. And can you email me all of your houses that you have for sale and let me see your happiest one? And that's how we ended up with that. And then the third deal that we did was a lot like a word of mouth person who had 2 duplexes for sale and got a hold of us.
Yeah. I mean, you know a lot already to know the things to ask, which is always like, let me see all the properties. Which one do you want to offload? Where did you learn that from?
I just knew that with the BRRRR method, you wanted to get a really crappy house so that we could force a lot of equity. So that's why I was like, let me see your worst one.
Yeah. I can see why you're ahead of the game here at 25 because you're asking all the right questions. Well, let's get into a couple things. One, your age, and then I want to talk to you about being a female in the investing space because that's obviously part of your WIIRE community. Has the age been an issue? I mean, you just seem like you have it together, but have you run into issues with people saying like, what do you mean you want to buy this house? You're like a baby. Especially old school investors, they're like,
Yeah, totally. I haven't run into any concrete issues. I do feel very self-conscious when people do find out my age. On social media, I talk about my age a lot so people know, but when it
yeah,
comes to like being in my actual market, I definitely don't tell people my age because I don't want them to get freaked out or, I don't want them to think that I'm like immature or something. So I try to steer away from that. Um, but yeah, did I
yeah. I
answer your
mean,
question?
yeah, no, I think that's smart. I mean, they're going to find out at some point, but at least you've built the rapport. And of course, on social, they can see like you're doing a lot. And one thing that I think is really good about your social is it's clear it's not fake. Like that's when I looked at it, I was like, oh, okay, there's a lot. Like you're really doing stuff. There's just so much social that you can tell is kind of like, I'm not sure this is actually what's happening, but you've really created an investor community that helps bolster what you do as well. Um, let's get into the male female thing for real estate investing because I've talked to lots of my female friends investors about this. Have you run into much sexism in the industry as a young female just trying to get deals and compete where it's no, I wouldn't say predominantly male anymore, but definitely more male than female.
I haven't run into any huge roadblocks, but of course, there's always little things that you'll
Yes.
pick up on. Like contractors will always assume that it's Brant that does
Yeah,
everything when in
very
reality, I'm
common.
like, he doesn't even know how to access the Google Drive. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I do it all. Granted, he does know a lot about the construction, which is stereotypically like a man's world. So I definitely do my best to like learn and know more about that so I can ask the right questions and look like I know what I'm talking about and know what I'm talking about.
yeah,
But for the most part, I think that the worst part is just like the loneliness. If you're a woman in real estate going to meetups or talking to contractors and just it can be awkward if you're not so much an extrovert or super confident to be the only girl or one of the only few people in the room.
yeah,
So that's why like WIIRE is so important to me because sometimes I'm like, is this world need WIIRE? Like, is that necessary? And then I go to a conference and it's like 99% male. The speakers are like all male. And I'm like, okay, yes, I'm on the right path. WIIRE's needed.
yeah.
This is totally a good thing.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about Wire Community. You started this a little more than a year ago. Tell us a little bit about what it is and what it means to you and the other participants in there. Because I've done some research on it. I think it's fantastic, um, and I think it's exactly what's needed, like you said before. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, WIIRE means the world to me. I started it because when I started in real estate 2.5 years ago, I wanted a community of women just to chat and learn from. And so I just started a random online meetup. It went super well. I started to realize, oh my gosh, there's really a need for this.
Yeah,
So I started it with my co founder and friend, Amelia McGee. It's now been We've now done WIIRE officially for a year and a half. We've done retreats all over the US. We have our podcast. We have our free Facebook community, Instagram blogs, all of that good stuff. But I think the number one thing that we hear from people, from women who are in WIIRE, is just the judgment free space to ask questions and make friends and be yourself and connect with people who are doing the same thing. Because the number one thing that we heard when people come to our retreats is, I don't have anybody at home to talk about this stuff
Hmm.
with. And I'm sure you felt that way at some point when people give you that glazed over look and they just like, or they're like, oh, so you're a realtor. Or,
yeah,
oh, so, and like people just don't get it. So to
yeah.
be able to be in a group of people who get it so deeply and are trying to do the same thing that you are is just amazing and feels great.